winter is a busy time in the landscape, as this is the ideal time to prune many of our woody trees and shrubs. As you can see with the tree behind me, with the leaves off of the plant, we can actually see much more of the structure, and that helps make pruning easier. Also, with the plants dormant, they're going to be less susceptible to stress as a result from pruning. And the other thing that's dormant right now are disease agents, so we'll have less of a chance of contaminating plants by moving a disease agent from one tree to another because they're not active right now. Of course, that doesn't mean we shouldn't sterilize our equipment after we use it. Now, there's a lot of different pruning equipment available, and each different tool has a rather specific purpose. So let's take a look at some of this. I'm going to start by looking at hand pruners and loppers, and these are very similar tools, differing mainly in size. So a hand pruner, as the name suggests, is designed to fit in your hand and operate from there. It's designed to cut fairly small stems up to about 3/4 of an inch in diameter. And pruners come in different sizes. This is the same tool made for larger hands and smaller hands. And I have smaller hands, and even though the blade's a little bit smaller, I find it really makes a difference. I'm much better able to make a cut cleanly by using the pruner that's appropriate for my hand size. And I really recommend trying different tools and finding one that fits your hand. It just makes the job easier. Now, sometimes you'll see a hand pruner that has a smaller blade or a pointier blade, and this is designed more for fine work with floral plants and with herbaceous plants. So we're not going to be using these to prune our trees and shrubs. Okay, the loppers are very similar to our hand pruners. They just have a longer handle, so they're designed to cut larger stems up to about 1 3/4 inch, depending on the particular lopper, and they have different length handles. The larger handles will cut larger materials in general. They also have more leverage to get through that. And then the smaller ones for a little bit smaller material. And the other thing the handles do is they give you a nice reach into a tree or shrub, either in or up. Now, both of our hand pruners and our loppers come with 2 different style blades. There's one called the anvil and one called a bypass. Now let's take a closer look at this. Now with the anvil pruner, the top blade, as you close it, actually strikes the bottom blade. They come together. And this does not leave a very clean cut on fresh living material. So these anvil type pruners are actually used to prune out dead wood from trees and shrubs. The bypass head, the top blade actually moves past the lower blade when you cut, and that allows you to make a much cleaner cut. So we use the bypass style pruners when we're pruning living tissue. And that's an important thing to remember so that you're not causing any injury to your plant as you make your pruning cuts. Now, a lot of times we also find that our pruners have either a ratcheting or a gear system, and what that does is gives us more leverage. It makes it easier to cut through large stems. It's a little bit more expensive perhaps, but I find that that's quite worth the investment to buy a tool that helps you get the job done easier. Now, another type of pruning equipment that we see in the garden centers are shears. Now, shears have elongated blades that come to a point, more or less. And these are not used to cut woody material. They're actually used for shaping shrubs and particularly evergreens. We use them to shear off the outer foliage of boxwoods, for example, or junipers, and they're used to give more of a formal appearance. So we won't be using these as we work on our trees and shrubs. Now, we've looked at tools that'll cut stems up to about 1 3/4 inch, maybe 2 inches, depending on the size of our lopper. When the stem's larger than that, we need to go to a saw. Mainly when we're working with a saw, we're going to look for a pruning saw that has kind of a hooked blade and a handle, whether wood or plastic. The blade is fairly thin because remember it has to pass through the branch that we're cutting, And the teeth are somewhat coarse, and they're designed to cut as you pull the blade through the wood. Some blades have teeth that cut in both directions. Another type of saw that we'll often see is the bow saw. And bow saws are also effective at cutting wood. We see these a lot when we're cutting down a small tree, but because of this large handle, it's hard to get inside a tree or a shrub to cut. So they're not as efficient working inside a tree. They're more for large, very accessible limbs. Now sometimes we need to cut a branch that's overhead, out of reach, and for that we're going to use a pole saw. And most pole saws actually have a hooked saw, and they also have a lopper style cutting blade attached to a pulley system. And when you would hook this over a branch that needs to be cut, and again this is going to be a smaller branch up to about 1 3/4 inch, and then we'll pull the levy and cut through that branch. And then for the larger materials we'd have to use the saw. Now most pole saws either have a telescoping handle, or here we have an extension pole so that we can reach up pretty high with that. Now there's a few safety considerations we need to make when we're working with any of this pruning equipment. We want to always wear gloves. When we're working overhead, we certainly want to use a safety helmet because we don't want any material falling on our heads. And whenever I'm sawing, I like to use a pair of safety goggles because there's a lot of sawdust that'll blow around and can get into your eyes. Now there's a few other considerations when we're working above our heads. As you can see here, we have some electric lines pretty close to our trees. It is extremely important to remember that electricity moves through trees, and we can get electrocuted if a branch touches an electric wire. So never prune a tree that's within 10 feet of an electric line. When you're sawing on a branch, it has quite a big sway and can move pretty large distances. So if you're unsure, or if you know you're too close to those electric lines, call your utility company and they will arrange to have the pruning done. Some other safety considerations when we're working overhead is to never prune directly over your head. Once you cut that material, it's just going to fall on you. So instead, you want to move out to the side and cut from the side. If that stem is out of reach, do not use a ladder. Pruning and ladders do not mix. They just call for some sort of injury to happen. So if the limb is out of your reach, it's really best to call a certified arborist to do the job. Anytime you're in doubt, find a professional and they will help you get the job done properly. Well, let's look at a few other pieces of equipment. I want to talk a little bit about chainsaws. Professional arborists use chainsaws quite frequently when they're working on large trees, and they're useful for cutting stems that are larger than 3-4 inches. However, people should not use a chainsaw in a tree unless they have good experience and knowledge of how to use that. And so I generally don't recommend chainsaws as a pruning tool to homeowners. Now they are very useful for limbs that have been fallen from storm damage or that are already on the ground, to cut those into smaller pieces. And when you're using a chainsaw, in addition to our hard hat and our glasses, our gloves, we also want to use some other protective equipment. It's important to protect our ears, as chainsaws are very loud when they're running. You can use the larger type or the little earbuds that fit in. Chaps are also important. They go over your legs and will protect your legs in case the chainsaw kicks back. And we want some heavy shoes, leather boots, something with a hard toe to protect our feet as well. Now the majority of injuries from working with a chainsaw happen with the kickback, and that happens when the blade hits something hard in the stem like a knot and causes the blade to come up. Now you can imagine if you're holding it in front of you, it could come right up into you. So you always want to work on your side with the chainsaw so that if there is any kickback, the blade is clear of your body. Now there are some other tools that have chainsaws. We do have pole saws with a chainsaw blade on the end. And again, this is something I would caution homeowners when using. If you do choose to use something like this, be sure to work from the side and wear all of your safety equipment. Some newer products have chainsaw blades housed inside a protective housing, and they only come out when they're cutting through the wood. So this is just a design make it a little bit safer for homeowners to use. But again, you want to wear all of your personal protection gear when you're working with that. Now remember, there's many different tools available for pruning. You want to make sure that you select the right tool to get the job done properly. Before you begin work, scan the area. Make sure there's no hazards. Look for electric lines. Look for broken or dangling limbs up in the tree canopy. You definitely don't want to put yourself into danger when you're working on a tree. And whenever you're in doubt, call a certified professional arborist to get the job done.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.